10 years ago, I walked out of my childhood home with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. My name is Serafina, and I discovered my parents had stolen my entire college fund, $23,000 I had saved since I was 12, to bail out my criminal brother Marcus for the third time. They chose their golden boy over their daughter's future, calling it family loyalty. What they did not know was that I had been secretly recording their conversations for months, documenting every lie, every manipulation, every dollar they stole from me. Hey, beautiful souls watching from around the world. Before we dive into this wild family revenge story, drop a comment below, letting me know where you are watching from. I love connecting with you all. If you are ready for a story about family betrayal, ultimate karma, and sweet justice that will leave you absolutely shocked, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this tale has more twists than a roller coaster. Trust me, you will want to see how this ends. Growing up, I always knew Marcus was the favorite. While I worked part-time jobs since 14 to save for college, he spent his days getting into trouble and charming his way out of consequences. My parents, Robert and Linda, treated him like he could do no wrong, even when he was arrested for theft at 16, drug possession at 18, and fraud at 21. I had been diligently saving every penny for my dream of attending Northwestern University's journalism program. Babysitting neighbors' kids, working at the local diner, tutoring struggling students. I sacrificed my teenage social life for my future. By my senior year, I had accumulated $23,000 in a savings account that my parents had access to since I was a minor when it was opened. The first red flag came when I tried to check my balance online and could not access the account. When I called the bank, they informed me that the account had been closed and the funds transferred. My heart sank as I rushed home demanding answers from my parents. Where is my college money? I confronted them in the living room, my voice trembling with rage and disbelief. My mother avoided eye contact, fidgeting with her wedding ring. Serafina, honey, we can explain. Marcus needed help. My father interrupted, his voice defensive. He made some mistakes and the bail was expensive. We knew you would understand. Family comes first. Family comes first, I repeated, my voice rising. What about my family? What about my future? That money was mine. You can take out student loans like everyone else. My mother finally spoke, her tone dismissive. Marcus could have gone to prison. We saved him. You saved him? This is the fourth time you have bailed him out. When will it stop? My father stood up, his face reddening. That is enough disrespect, young lady. We are your parents, and we made the right decision. Marcus is family, and family helps family. What am I then? I whispered, tears streaming down my face. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. To them, I was the responsible one who would figure it out, while Marcus was the precious son who needed constant rescuing. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I started recording every conversation, every phone call, every admission of what they had done. I documented their pattern of financial abuse, their blatant favoritism, and their complete disregard for my future. Over the next few weeks, I discovered the extent of their betrayal. They had not only taken my college fund, but had also used my social security number to open credit cards, racking up thousands of dollars in debt in my name. They had forged my signature on loan documents claiming I had consented to help my brother. When I confronted them with this evidence, they gaslighted me, claiming I was being dramatic and ungrateful. After everything we have done for you, my mother said, this is how you repay us by attacking your own family. You attacked me first, I replied quietly, when you stole from me. Marcus, meanwhile, was nowhere to be found. He had used their sacrifice to disappear again, probably planning his next scheme. When he finally showed up high and reeking of alcohol, I presented him with the evidence of what our parents had done for him. "Cool story, sis," he slurred, completely unbothered. "Maybe you should have been born with a penis. Then they might have cared about you too." His words cut deep, but they also crystallized my resolve. I realized I was never going to be their priority no matter what I achieved or how much I sacrificed. I was just the backup plan, the reliable daughter who would always be there to clean up their messes. The final straw came when I learned they had contacted Northwestern, claiming I was no longer interested in attending and requesting my acceptance be withdrawn. They had destroyed not just my finances, but my future, all to protect their golden boy who had thanked them by disappearing into the night. That evening, I packed my belongings while they slept. I left a note on the kitchen table. "You chose Marcus over me. Now live with that choice." I walked out at 3 in the morning carrying everything I owned in 2 suitcases with $47 in my pocket and a heart full of determination. For the first few months after leaving survival was my only focus. I moved 3 states away to Denver, Colorado, where I knew no one and could start fresh. I worked multiple minimum wage jobs, cleaning offices at night, serving tables during lunch shifts, and walking dogs on weekends. Every dollar was precious, every meal calculated. But I was not just surviving. I was planning. During my breaks, I researched everything about financial fraud, identity theft, and family law. I discovered that what my parents had done was not just morally wrong, it was federally illegal. Using my Social Security number without permission constituted identity theft. Forging my signature was fraud. Taking my money under false pretenses was theft. 6 months after leaving home, I had saved enough money to consult with a lawyer. Attorney Patricia Williams specialized in financial crimes and family law. When I presented my evidence, the recordings, the forged documents, the credit reports showing fraudulent accounts, her eyes widened. "Serafina, what your parents did is serious criminal behavior," she explained during our consultation. "This is not a civil matter. This involves multiple federal crimes." "What can we do?" I asked, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "We can file criminal complaints, pursue civil litigation for damages, and work to restore your credit. But I need to warn you, this will likely destroy any remaining relationship with your family." "They destroyed that relationship when they chose theft over my future," I replied without hesitation. The legal process was slow but thorough. We filed complaints with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, the local district attorney's office, and initiated civil proceedings to recover damages. The evidence was overwhelming. My parents had left a paper trail that clearly documented their crimes. Meanwhile, I enrolled in community college using financial aid, determined to continue my education despite their sabotage. I worked during the day and studied at night, rebuilding my life 1 credit hour at a time. The breakthrough came 18 months after I had left home. Agent Sarah Mitchell from the FBI's White Collar Crimes Unit called me personally. "Miss Serafina, we have been investigating your case, and I wanted to update you on our progress. We have found evidence that your parents have been engaged in a pattern of financial fraud extending beyond just your situation." My heart raced. "What do you mean?" "They have been claiming multiple dependents on their tax returns who do not exist, including claiming you as a dependent for 3 years after you turned 18 and moved out. They have also been involved in a scheme to defraud Medicare by claiming medical expenses for treatments that never occurred." The scope of their criminal behavior was staggering. They had not just stolen from me, they had been stealing from taxpayers for years. "We are preparing to execute search warrants and make arrests," Agent Mitchell continued. "I wanted to give you advance notice because this will likely become public." "When?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Next week. We will need you to provide testimony, but we have enough evidence to proceed without your cooperation if you are not comfortable." I will testify, I said firmly. They need to face consequences for what they have done. The day of the arrests, I was sitting in my tiny Denver apartment when my phone started ringing. Unknown numbers, one after another. I let them all go to voicemail. Finally, I listened to the messages. Serafina, this is your Aunt Margaret. I cannot believe what I am seeing on the news. Your parents have been arrested for fraud and theft. Where are you? We need to talk. Sarah, it is your cousin Jake. Holy shit, what happened? The police are all over your parents' house. Are you okay? Message after message from relatives I had not spoken to in years, all shocked by the news that had apparently made the local television stations. The last message was from Marcus, and his tone was very different from his usual arrogance. Sarah, what the fuck did you do? Mom and Dad are in jail because of you. You ruined our family over some stupid college money. I hope you are happy. I saved that message because it perfectly captured everything wrong with my family's dynamic. Even faced with evidence that our parents were criminals, Marcus blamed me for exposing their crimes rather than them for committing them. The news coverage was extensive. Local couple arrested in multi-year fraud scheme read the headline in my hometown newspaper. The article detailed how Robert and Linda had stolen from their own daughter, committed tax fraud, and bilked Medicare out of thousands of dollars. But the real vindication came from the community response. My high school teachers reached out through social media expressing shock and support. Former neighbors who had watched me work multiple jobs while Marcus partied sent messages of encouragement. Even my old boss from the diner called to say she had always suspected something was wrong with my family dynamic. You were such a hard-working kid, she said, her voice emotional. I always wondered why your parents never seemed proud of you. Now I know they were too busy enabling your brother to see what an amazing daughter they had. The preliminary hearings were surreal. Sitting in that courtroom watching my parents in orange jumpsuits, I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. They had chosen this path when they decided that protecting Marcus was more important than supporting me. Their lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive daughter seeking revenge, but the evidence was too overwhelming. When the judge reviewed the financial records, the forged documents, and the recorded conversations, his expression grew increasingly stern. This court has rarely seen such a clear-cut case of family financial abuse, Judge Harrison stated during the preliminary hearing. The defendants not only stole from their minor child, but continued to use her identity for criminal purposes years after she had left their home. My parents' faces were pale as the full scope of their legal troubles became clear. They were facing federal charges that could result in decades in prison. But this was only the beginning. As news of their arrests spread, more secrets began to surface, and I realized that what I had discovered was just the tip of the iceberg. The weeks following my parents' arrest brought unexpected allies into my life. The first was my Aunt Margaret, my father's younger sister, who had always been the black sheep of the family. She reached out not with judgment, but with support and shocking revelations of her own. Serafina, I need to tell you something, she said during our first phone call in over 5 years. Your parents have been lying about me to the family for decades. They told everyone I was jealous and bitter, but the truth is, I cut contact because I suspected they were stealing from your grandmother before she died. My grandmother had passed away 3 years earlier, leaving what we believed was a modest inheritance. According to my parents, she had spent most of her savings on medical care and left only a few $1,000s to be split among her children. That is not true, Aunt Margaret continued, her voice heavy with emotion. Your grandmother showed me her will and bank statements before she died. She had over $200,000 saved, plus the house was paid off and worth at least $300,000. She left specific instructions that half of everything should go into trust funds for you and Marcus's education. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not only had my parents stolen my college fund, but they had also stolen my inheritance, and likely Marcus's as well, though he would never know or care. "Why did not you say something before?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I tried, but they convinced the family that I was lying because I was bitter about being written out of the will. They had somehow obtained power of attorney over your grandmother's finances in her final months when she had dementia. By the time she died, they had already transferred most of her assets to themselves. This information was crucial for the ongoing criminal case. I immediately contacted Attorney Williams, who connected me with Agent Mitchell. The elder abuse charges would be added to the growing list of federal crimes my parents were facing. But Aunt Margaret was not the only unexpected ally. Through social media posts about my situation, I was contacted by 3 other young women who had experienced similar family financial abuse. They found me through a support group for financial abuse survivors that I had joined. The first was Jade, whose parents had stolen her inheritance from her deceased grandparents to fund their gambling addiction. The second was Kelsey, whose family had used her Social Security number to take out business loans that failed, leaving her with ruined credit at age 19. The third was Maya, whose parents had convinced her to sign over her settlement money from a car accident, claiming they would invest it for her only to spend it on luxury vacations and a boat. "We should form a support network," Jade suggested during one of our video calls. "There are more of us out there who need help navigating the legal system and healing from this kind of betrayal." Together, we created a private online group called Financial Family Survivors, where we shared resources, legal advice, and emotional support. Within months, our group grew to over 50 members from across the country, all with similar stories of family financial abuse. The group became instrumental in my healing process, but it also served a strategic purpose. We began documenting patterns of family financial abuse and working with attorneys and law enforcement to identify systemic issues in how these cases were handled. Meanwhile, my case was gaining media attention beyond my hometown. A reporter named David Chin from a major news network reached out wanting to do a feature story on family financial abuse. Initially, I was hesitant, but Attorney Williams convinced me that speaking publicly could help other victims and put additional pressure on the legal system to take these crimes seriously. The interview was scheduled to air on the same day as my parents' formal arraignment. I had spent 3 years building my new life, earning my associate degree, and preparing to transfer to a 4-year university to finish my journalism degree. Now, I was about to tell my story to a national audience. "What do you want people to understand about family financial abuse?" David asked during the interview. "I want them to know that it is not just about money," I replied, looking directly into the camera. "It is about betrayal, manipulation, and the destruction of trust. When parents steal from their children, they are not just taking money. They are stealing futures, dreams, and the fundamental security that families should provide." The interview would prove to be a turning point, but not in the way I expected. As the broadcast date approached, I received a call that would change everything once again. "Miss Serafina, this is Detective Reynolds from the Fraud Division. We have been investigating your parents' financial activities, and we have discovered something significant. It appears they have been operating under multiple identities and have similar victims in at least 3 other states." The scope of their criminal enterprise was far larger than anyone had realized. They were not just family abusers. They were sophisticated con artists who had been targeting vulnerable people for years. "We believe you may have other siblings or half-siblings who are also victims," Detective Reynolds continued. "We have found birth certificates and adoption records that suggest your parents were involved in adoption fraud schemes where they collected money from prospective parents and then disappeared with the funds." The revelation was staggering. Not only had I been abused by people I thought were my parents, but they had been destroying other families' and children's lives for profit. "We need your help," Detective Reynolds said, "Your case broke this investigation open, but we need someone who understands their methods to help us identify other victims and build a comprehensive case." I agreed without hesitation. This was no longer just about my stolen college fund or even my grandmother's inheritance. This was about stopping career criminals who had been destroying lives for decades. The investigation revealed that Robert and Linda were not even their real names. They had been operating under false identities for over 20 years, moving from state to state, targeting elderly people, adoptive families, and their own children in elaborate financial schemes. As I prepared to testify before a grand jury about their crimes, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my family had been a lie. But I also realized that this revelation, as painful as it was, had given me something I never expected: the power to stop them from hurting anyone else. The network of allies I had built, Aunt Margaret, the other survivors, the legal team, law enforcement, and the media, had become my chosen family. Together, we were going to ensure that justice was served not just for me, but for every person whose life had been destroyed by these career criminals who had masqueraded as my parents for 21 years. But as the grand jury date approached, I would learn that even this shocking revelation was not the end of the story. Someone I trusted was about to betray me in the most devastating way possible, threatening to undo everything we had worked so hard to achieve. The betrayal came from the person I trusted most. 3 weeks before the grand jury hearing that would determine whether my parents faced federal racketeering charges, I received a devastating phone call from Attorney Williams. "Serafina, we need to meet immediately. There has been a serious breach in our case." Her voice was strained in a way I had never heard before. When I arrived at her office, she was pacing behind her desk, clearly agitated. "Someone has been feeding information to your parents' defense team," she said without preamble. "They know about our strategy, our evidence timeline, and most importantly, they know about the other victims we have identified." My blood ran cold. How is that possible? The only people who knew everything were you, Agent Mitchell, Detective Reynolds, and Aunt Margaret, she finished grimly. The words hit me like a physical blow. Margaret, who had been my primary emotional support, who had provided crucial evidence about my grandmother's stolen inheritance, who had helped me understand my family's history of deception. "That cannot be right," I whispered, but even as I said it, pieces began falling into place. Margaret always seemed to know things about the investigation before I told her. She had been strangely interested in details about other victims. She had even suggested specific legal strategies that seemed designed to benefit my parents rather than secure convictions. Agent Mitchell arrived shortly after carrying a thick folder of evidence. "Serafina, I am sorry to have to show you this, but we have been monitoring your parents' phone calls from jail. Margaret has been visiting them regularly and passing along everything you have shared with her." She opened the folder, revealing transcripts of recorded conversations between Margaret and my father. My hands shook as I read his words. "Keep getting information from Serafina. The kid still trusts you. We need to know what evidence they have and which witnesses they plan to call." Margaret's response was equally chilling. "She tells me everything. I have been documenting all the other victims they have found in their testimonies. The prosecution thinks they have a strong case, but we can undermine their key witnesses." I felt physically sick. The woman who had comforted me through panic attacks, who had validated my experiences, who had become the mother figure I never had, was working against me the entire time. "There is more," Agent Mitchell said gently. "We believe Margaret was involved in the original crimes. She was not just your father's sister. She was his partner. The elderly victims they targeted Margaret was the one who gained their trust first, posing as a caring social worker or church volunteer." The revelation shattered everything I thought I knew about my family dynamics. Margaret had not been the black sheep who was pushed out. She had been an active participant in their criminal enterprise, playing the role of the concerned relative to manipulate me. Why? I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to know the answer. Money, Detective Reynolds replied bluntly. Your parents have been hiding assets for years. They need to discredit the case to avoid asset forfeiture. Everything they stole, from you, from your grandmother, from their other victims, they want to keep it. The immediate concern was damage control. Margaret knew about witnesses we had planned to call, evidence we had gathered, and strategies we intended to use. She had essentially given the defense team a roadmap to destroy our case. Can we still proceed? I asked, feeling defeated. Yes, but we need to restructure everything, Attorney Williams explained. The good news is that we now have evidence of witness tampering and obstruction of justice. Margaret has just added federal crimes to her own record. The next few days were a whirlwind of strategy sessions and damage assessment. We had to contact every victim and witness to inform them that their information had been compromised. Several people withdrew from the case entirely too frightened or discouraged to continue. The hardest call was to Maya, one of the financial abuse survivors from our support group. Serafina, I am scared, she said, crying on the phone. If they know who I am and what I shared, what if they try to hurt me or my family? I understood her fear, but her withdrawal meant losing a crucial witness whose story paralleled mine and demonstrated a pattern of family financial abuse. Each witness who backed out weakened our case significantly. The betrayal also took a personal toll that was harder to quantify. Margaret had been my lifeline during the darkest period of my life. She had listened to me cry about feeling abandoned by my family, never mentioning that she was actively working to help the people who had abandoned me. Every conversation we had shared felt tainted now. Every piece of comfort she had offered was revealed as manipulation. Every moment I had felt less alone because of her support was exposed as part of an elaborate deception. How did I not see it? I asked during a therapy session I had started attending to cope with the overwhelming stress of the legal proceedings. Because you were looking for family, my therapist, Dr. Sarah Kim, explained. You were grieving the loss of your parents and desperately wanted to believe that someone in your family actually cared about you. Margaret exploited that vulnerability expertly. The worst part was that Margaret's betrayal played perfectly into my parents' narrative about me being an ungrateful, vindictive daughter. Their defense team was now arguing that I had been manipulated by outside forces, ironically by Margaret herself, into making false accusations against loving parents who had simply made difficult financial decisions to help their troubled son. The defendant's daughter has been coached by individuals with their own agendas. Their lawyer argued in a pretrial hearing I was not supposed to know about but learned of through news coverage. She is a victim herself, a victim of manipulation by people who wanted to destroy this family for their own purposes. The irony was suffocating. Margaret, who had been working for my parents all along, was being blamed for turning me against them, when in reality she had been trying to undermine the case that would hold them accountable. As the grand jury date approached, I felt more alone than I had since the day I walked out of my childhood home with 2 suitcases. The support network I had built was crumbling. Key witnesses were withdrawing. My primary source of emotional support had been revealed as an enemy agent. But in the darkest moments, I reminded myself why I had started this fight. It was not just about my college fund anymore. It was about the elderly woman in Florida who had lost her retirement savings to my parents' Medicare fraud scheme. It was about the adoptive families who had paid thousands of dollars for children they never received. It was about stopping career criminals from destroying more lives. 3 days before the grand jury hearing, I made a decision that would define the rest of my life. Instead of backing down or accepting a reduced plea deal that would let my parents serve minimal time, I decided to fight back against Margaret's betrayal with the same determination I had used to expose my parents' crimes. I was about to discover that sometimes the universe provides exactly the ally you need at exactly the moment you need them most, but first, I had to prove to myself that I was strong enough to stand alone if necessary. The turnaround began with an unexpected phone call at 6 in the morning, 3 days before the grand jury hearing. I almost did not answer the unknown number, assuming it was another reporter or someone trying to get information about the case. Miss Serafina, this is Jonathan Blackwood from Blackwood Investigations. I represent a client who has been following your case, and we have information that could significantly strengthen your position. I was immediately skeptical. After Margaret's betrayal, I trusted no one. What kind of information? I asked cautiously. The kind that proves your Aunt Margaret has been running financial scams for over 15 years, and we have documentation of every single one. Can you meet with my client today? The meeting was arranged for that afternoon at Attorney Williams's office. When I arrived, I found a distinguished older gentleman in his 70s waiting with Jonathan Blackwood, a private investigator who specialized in financial crimes. Miss Serafina, my name is Harrison Fletcher. The older man introduced himself. I am a retired FBI agent, and Margaret Torres, the woman you know as your aunt, destroyed my daughter's life 8 years ago. My heart began racing as he opened a briefcase filled with documents, photographs, and recorded conversations. Margaret has been operating under multiple identities across several states, Harrison continued. She targeted my daughter Rebecca when Rebecca was going through a difficult divorce. Margaret posed as a financial counselor and convinced Rebecca to invest her divorce settlement in a fake investment scheme. Rebecca lost everything: her house, her children's college funds, her retirement savings. Jonathan Blackwood spread the evidence across the conference table. We have been tracking Margaret for years. When your case made national news, we recognized her immediately, even though she was using the name Margaret instead of Maria, which is what she called herself when she targeted the Fletcher family. The documentation was overwhelming. Margaret had been operating sophisticated financial scams since at least 2008. She would identify vulnerable people, recent divorcees, elderly individuals with cognitive decline, young adults estranged from their families, and gain their trust before stealing their money. She has at least 12 different Social Security numbers that we have identified, Harrison explained. The woman is a master manipulator who studies her targets extensively before making contact. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Miss Serafina, we do not believe Margaret is your father's sister at all, Jonathan said gently. We have been investigating your parents' real identities, and everything suggests that Margaret is actually your father's wife, his first wife, who he never divorced. The words seemed to echo in the suddenly silent conference room. That means your mother Linda is not legally married to your father, Attorney Williams said immediately, understanding the implications. And if Margaret is his legal wife, she may have rights to assets that we assumed belonged to Linda. Harrison leaned forward. There is more. We believe Margaret and your father have been running this operation together for decades. The reason she approached you as the concerned aunt was to monitor the investigation and protect their shared assets. Everything they have stolen over the years is hidden in accounts that only the two of them can access. This revelation reframed everything. Margaret had not betrayed me for money. She had been protecting her own criminal enterprise from the beginning. I had never been dealing with family dysfunction. I had been the target of career criminals who had used familial bonds to manipulate and control me. Why are you helping me? I asked Harrison, still struggling to process this information. Because Margaret needs to be stopped, he replied firmly. My daughter never recovered from what they did to her. She took her own life 2 years ago, unable to cope with the financial and emotional devastation. If your case can finally bring them to justice, then Rebecca's death will not have been meaningless. The weight of responsibility I felt was enormous, but it was also clarifying. This was bigger than my stolen college fund or even my grandmother's inheritance. This was about stopping predators who had been destroying lives for decades. Jonathan handed me a flash drive. This contains documentation of every financial crime we can prove Margaret committed over the past 15 years. Bank records, forged documents, recorded conversations with victims, and most importantly, evidence of the hidden offshore accounts where they have been storing stolen money. Attorney Williams immediately called Agent Mitchell, and within 2 hours, we had an emergency meeting with the entire prosecution team. The new evidence did not just strengthen our case, it completely transformed it. "This changes everything," Agent Mitchell said after reviewing the documentation. "We are not just looking at individual financial crimes anymore. This is a RICO case, a criminal organization operating across state lines for decades. The Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act carried much more severe penalties and would allow prosecutors to seize all assets connected to the criminal enterprise. More importantly, it meant that Margaret could be arrested immediately for ongoing criminal activity. We can execute arrest warrants for Margaret tomorrow," Detective Reynolds explained. "And with this new evidence, we can also freeze all the offshore accounts before they can move the money." But Harrison had one more surprise for us. "Miss Serafina, there is something else you need to know. We have been monitoring Margaret's communications, and she has been planning to flee the country next week. She has already transferred most of the liquid assets to accounts in countries without extradition treaties. If we had not intervened now, she would have disappeared forever, taking all the stolen money with her." The timeline was incredibly tight. Margaret's arrest had to happen before she realized we knew about her escape plan. The grand jury hearing had to proceed as scheduled to maintain the illusion that everything was proceeding normally. And we had to coordinate with international authorities to freeze assets in multiple countries. "Can we do this?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of the operation. "Yes," Agent Mitchell replied with confidence. "But we need you to do something very difficult. We need you to call Margaret and have a normal conversation. We need her to believe that you still trust her, so she does not run early." The phone call was one of the hardest things I had ever done. Knowing what I now knew about Margaret's true identity and motivations, I had to pretend to still see her as my supportive aunt. "Hi, Margaret. I just wanted to thank you again for all your support." I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I do not know how I would have gotten through this without you." "Oh, sweetie, you know I will always be here for you," she replied in the caring tone I now recognized as completely fake. "Family has to stick together, especially when outsiders are trying to tear us apart." After hanging up, I felt both disgusted and empowered. Margaret thought she was still manipulating me, but now I was the one with hidden information and secret allies. The next 24 hours would determine whether decades of criminal activity would finally face consequences, or whether the most sophisticated financial predators I had ever encountered would escape to continue destroying lives in another country. As I prepared for the grand jury hearing that would now include testimony about a criminal organization rather than just family financial abuse, I realized that Harrison Fletcher had given me something even more valuable than evidence. He had given me the truth about who my real enemies were and the knowledge that I was not fighting this battle alone. The coordinated takedown happened at dawn on the day of the grand jury hearing. As I was preparing my testimony, FBI agents were simultaneously executing arrest warrants for Margaret in Phoenix, where she had been staying under the name Maria Santos, and freezing assets in 7 different countries. Agent Mitchell called me at 7 in the morning. "We have her. Margaret is in custody, and she is not going anywhere." We also recovered over $1.2 million from the offshore accounts before she could transfer them. The relief was overwhelming, but the day was far from over. At 10 o'clock, I walked into the federal courthouse to face the grand jury. After months of preparation, betrayal, and revelation, I was finally going to tell the complete truth about the criminal organization that had masqueraded as my family. The testimony lasted 4 hours. I walked the grand jury through every aspect of the crimes, from my stolen college fund to my grandmother's missing inheritance from the Medicare fraud to the adoption scams from Margaret's manipulation to the international money laundering operation. When I finished, the foreman of the grand jury asked one final question. Miss Serafina, what do you want to see happen to these people? I want them to face the same consequences that any career criminals would face. I replied. They have been destroying lives for decades while hiding behind the pretense of family relationships. I want them stopped permanently. The grand jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a true bill on all charges. My parents and Margaret were now facing federal racketeering charges that carried sentences of up to 20 years in prison. But the legal victory was only part of the resolution. The investigation had identified 43 additional victims across multiple states, and restitution would total over $3 million. Most importantly, the criminal organization was permanently dismantled. Harrison Fletcher was there when the indictments were announced. Rebecca would be proud of you, he said, tears in his eyes. You did what we could never do. You stopped them. The sentencing hearing took place 6 months later. I had been dreading facing my parents in court, but when the day arrived, I felt only a calm sense of closure. My father received 18 years for racketeering fraud and money laundering. My mother received 15 years for her role in the financial crimes. Margaret, as the ringleader with the longest criminal history, received 25 years and would likely die in prison. When given the opportunity to make victim impact statements, I stood before the court one final time. Your Honor, these people taught me that DNA does not make a family. They showed me that love is not about loyalty to people who hurt you, but about surrounding yourself with people who support your growth and healing. They thought they were destroying my future when they stole my college fund, but they actually freed me to build a life based on truth, justice, and genuine relationships. I looked directly at my parents as I continued. I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because carrying hatred would give you continued power over my life. I choose to let go of the anger so I can focus on the family I have chosen and the future I am building. The years following their sentencing brought changes I could never have imagined. The restitution money allowed me to complete my journalism degree at Northwestern, the school I had originally planned to attend. I graduated summa cum laude and was offered a position at the same network where David Chin worked, specializing in investigative reporting on financial crimes. My support group, Financial Family Survivors, evolved into a nonprofit organization that provides legal resources and emotional support to victims of family financial abuse. We have helped over 500 people navigate the complex process of recovering from financial betrayal by family members. Harrison Fletcher became like a grandfather to me, and we stayed in regular contact until his peaceful death 3 years later. He left me a letter that said, "You gave my daughter's death meaning by ensuring that her killer faced justice. You are the daughter I would have chosen." The other survivors from my original support group remained close friends. Jade completed law school and now specializes in elder abuse cases. Kelsey started a financial literacy program for young adults. Maya became a therapist who works with trauma survivors. Together, we created the family bonds that our birth families had failed to provide. Detective Reynolds often invited me to speak at law enforcement conferences about recognizing and investigating family financial abuse. Your case changed how we approach these crimes, she told me. Before your case, we treated family financial theft as civil matters. Now we understand that these are often federal crimes committed by sophisticated criminals. 5 years after the sentencing, I received a letter from my father in prison. He was requesting a visit and claiming he wanted to apologize. I read the letter once and then burned it. Some relationships are too broken to repair, and some apologies come too late to matter. Instead, I spent that weekend with my chosen family, the group of friends, colleagues, and mentors who had supported me through my healing journey. We gathered at my house in Denver, the same city where I had started over with $47 and a determination to survive. As I looked around the table at people who had chosen to love and support me without biological obligation, I realized that my parents had actually given me a gift they never intended. By showing me what family should not be, they had taught me to recognize and cherish what family could be. Now, 10 years after walking out of my childhood home with nothing but 2 suitcases and a broken heart, I have built a life filled with purpose, justice, and authentic relationships. I work every day to expose financial predators and support their victims. I have created a family of choice that provides the love and support that biology never guaranteed. The little girl who once believed that family loyalty meant accepting abuse and theft grew up to become a woman who understands that real family is built on mutual respect, honest communication, and genuine care for each other's well-being. To everyone watching this story, I want you to know that if you are experiencing family financial abuse, you are not alone and you are not powerless. Document everything, seek legal help, and remember that walking away from toxic family members is not betrayal. It is self-preservation. Sometimes the family you choose is infinitely better than the family you were born into. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and standing up for what is right? Have you experienced the healing power of chosen family after biological family failed you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories help other people feel less alone. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family trauma and finding justice. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better than financial abuse disguised as family love. Thank you for joining me on this journey from betrayal to healing, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and helping others do the same. Until next time, choose your family wisely and never let anyone convince you that love requires accepting abuse.